over the course of several years, when Sarah and I were first dating, we broke up 7 different times. We kept getting back together, but there was something that we didn't really understand. Both of us were very high in avoiding and accommodating and moving away from conflict. And it was only after we took all of the research that we had both learned in graduate school and turned it on ourselves where were really able to learn about the practices and the virtues of a good, clean fight. And we have been happily married ever since. Welcome to The Behaviorist, where today Ashlyn and I are in the studio talking through these virtues and these practices of having a good, clean fight at work. And so we're going to be exploring the ideas around what it means to have good disagreement, to have healthy conflict. Ashlyn's just completed writing an incredible article called In Celebration of Good Disagreements. And so I asked her if she'd come into the studio so we could talk through a couple of the practices and even just this mindset that conflict is healthy. It's not something to move away from. Right. It's something to set some structures around. Mm-hmm. I remember when I studied organizational conflict resolution, and my professor, she said, people don't hate conflict. What they hate, what they dread is mismanaged conflict. Mm-hmm. Conflict that causes hurt and misunderstanding. But when we can learn how to put some parameters around it and some norms around it, it can be everything. It can be everything. So
I love that.
Yeah, I love it too. It was really eye-opening for me when I first started seeing conflict as a healthy thing, the source of all creativity, like Donatella Versace says, conflict is the source of all creativity.
Yeah. When I started my graduate school degree, and I think it's gone on since then, but I entered it, peace and conflict resolution, thinking, how do we do less conflict?
Right.
And what I've realized, in studying and then just in life is that's not the question. Like, conflict happens. Conflict is normal. Conflict can be good. But what you just said, it's like, how can it feel less awful? How can it have norms and ways that we relate to each other that actually makes it productive? Exactly. So not less conflict, but better conflict, right?
Yeah. And just even sort of scrubbing the negative connotation of the word conflict. Mm-hmm. It's funny, when I was reading your article, you had some great statistics in there. One of the things that you had in there was about the data from CPP saying that 85% of workers deal with conflict at work. And I was like, oh, that's terrible. And then I was like, no, that's not terrible. That's my mind saying that.
Yeah.
There was another bit of data. You said 4 hours a week, 4 hours of our work week is devoted to conflict, managing conflict. And I thought, oh my gosh, the efficiency expert in me was like, we've got to change that. And I thought, well, actually, that's probably where the creativity is coming, the disruptions, the great ideas, the iron, sharpening the iron. Right. So even someone who is a practitioner of healthy conflict resolution, I read those words and I was like, we got to get rid of that.
Right. What's happening? This is bad, right?
This is bad. But maybe this is good.
Right.
Maybe this is good.
Yeah. Depends how the conflict
is. How's it managed? And so much of that, I think, is our culture, our leadership, our team norms, as you described in your really excellent article. So I think the first thing that I was going to ask you is whether or not you've ever been on a team where conflict isn't a dirty word and where it's healthy and disagreements sharpen our thinking and actually maybe even improve our relationships. Have you had that experience?
I've had glimmers of that experience.
Okay.
I've definitely been on teams where leadership has set the norm of we want people to bring their different experiences and perspectives because that enhances the work and it makes us better. I still think even with that, there haven't been the agreements or and this is how we will work through it when inevitably our perspectives bump up against each other, or we don't understand the lived experience of another person, or say something that actually hurts a person based on what they're experiencing. So there hasn't been that piece. And I've also seen teams pause and listen, like the power of active listening. If there's a couple people on the team who kind of have made a commitment to play that role, I've seen how that can really bring some transformation. But again, at that kind of like level of we're all agreeing to do this in a certain way, I can't think of one, honestly.
I happen to be on a board of directors right now. I know we're not supposed to guess other people's Enneagram types.
But how do you not? I mean, I always do that.
I think every single one of them is an Enneagram 8. And as an Enneagram 1, you know, the reformer, the perfectionist, I know how to get into the crackly tension and play along. But I've never experienced anything quite like this.
Okay.
And it's incredible for me. I have to prepare myself for these meetings. But they are so fruitful. Okay. I've never been on such a team of powerful thinkers who are not holding back at all in having healthy disagreements.
Wow.
They really do know how to have a good fight. And I keep wondering, why is this group like this? And I keep thinking it's because the chairman of the board incites it.
Interesting. How do they incite it? What do they do?
It feels like poking the bear a little bit, or maybe we'd call it stress testing. Asking questions that get people to stir things up, and also saying things himself that might be provocative in a way, and when things get provocative, just because the nature of these leaders, not holding back, not changing the subject. I see that so often.
Oh, absolutely.
They won't sit in the discomfort, but this board sits in the discomfort, and then they kind of roll around on the ground and get into the bear cub fight. It's kind of amazing.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Do they have a way during or after that they, I don't know, loop it around? Because it's still uncomfortable, I think, even when we have an agreement for how we're going to talk about something difficult. But like, how do they bring it around to then they can step out of the boardroom? I don't know, get a drink, be together.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's so important. And so Marit Wadelsberg, in her article about what sets genius teams apart in Harvard Business Review last summer, July 2024, she talks about genius executive teams. And yes, they're all self-actualized. They all have really high expectations for themselves and others. But it's this ingredient that they're really comfortable with the crackly tension, and they set rules of engagement, to your point, but they know how to go through a repair cycle. And so this board I'm on, they have habits for repair cycles too.
Okay.
And I've been watching how it happens really naturally and beautifully, really. They could teach the rest of us a thing or two. Yeah. But I haven't seen it as drinks, but I have seen that in other organizations. Let's get a drink. Yeah. I see it as text messages after meetings. I see it as emails. I see it as, let's jump on the call. Let's talk this through. Good. So it's kind of amazing. Yeah. But when we think about trust, that we have to have some mechanism for repairing trust, because it modulates up and down. And that's one of the things that I think is really important when we're thinking about creating norms for healthy conflict.
Yeah.
Did you, when you got married, I don't know, did you go through some sort of counseling before marriage?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, we did too.
Yeah.
And so did they have you talk through what you're going to do when you get into your first fight?
We did not talk about that. We talked about kind of our origin stories, like where we had come from in our family of origin.
Yeah.
We talked about the ways relationships change over time and what love can look like over time.
Yeah.
But we didn't talk about what to do in our first fight. Did you talk about what to do? Please.
I think it's just a really wonderful practice.
Yeah.
I like to use it in team forming retreats. Or, because when you're forming as co-leaders or a new team, there's the honeymoon period where everybody's being polite and no one, but it's so wonderful to say, okay, when it gets bloody.
Right.
What are we going to do?
Right.
What's the first thing we're going to do? What's the second? Who are we going to call? And just map that out so that everyone knows what to pull out of the drawer for when that happens.
Yeah.
So I think a lot about that on team forming.
It's like an opportunity zone for when to really say this is how. I love the when too, not if we disagree about something, but like when.
Let's hope.
Yeah.
Let's hope. I mean, and when we think about Tuckman's model and forming and storming, so many teams stay in forming.
Yeah.
And they never get to performing because they are not willing to go through the storming, which is the good, hopefully, the good conflict.
Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to talk to you a little bit also about the practices of really having a good, clean fight. And so in your article, you do such a nice job explaining looping for understanding. And for those of our listeners who haven't learned about looping for understanding, they might want to listen to our podcast episode with Mike McKenna and Tracy Cutler, where they talked about super communicators and looping for understanding. I like the way you discuss it because you're saying, okay, first there's the active listening part, and then there's the looping.
Right.
Could you, in a couple of sentences, describe what looping for understanding is?
Yeah. And that came straight out. So this is, I read the book High Conflict by Amanda Ripley, and that sort of structure understanding of looping for understanding really came out of how she was describing it. And I thought that was a little unique too, because active listening is one of my favorite things. You learn so much when you do it. So looping for understanding, like Kedron, you said, is there's the active listening portion where you listen to understand, not to respond, not to prove your point, but to really hear what is the person saying and what's underneath what they're saying. Like what are their feelings? Is there a story there? So it's listening with curiosity and with focus. Looping is checking that you actually did understand them. So looping is saying, I heard you say that you were on an incredible board that knows how to conflict well, and that it's really energizing to you. Did I hear that right? Yeah. And oftentimes we don't hear it right the first time. That's the really amazing thing, because as humans, we're notoriously not great at saying what we mean or at really understanding what somebody's meaning. So looping is checking it. That was more of a paragraph, but it's the listening with intent, with curiosity, and then it is saying with your words, which shows somebody that you've listened, I heard you say this. Was that right? And if it wasn't right, then, oh, okay, so I heard what you really mean is this.
There's so much I love about how you described looping just now. And in your article, I don't know if you remember this, but you talked about looping back with the most generous. Was that her word or was that your word? Because I was like, that sounds like an Ashlyn embellishment, which I love.
It might have been. I think it wasn't necessarily in the book. I would like to give credit because I remember reading it in an article, not the word generous, but almost the most like if you put effort into making another person's point or perspective sound strong, how would you describe their point or their perspective? So if I find the article, I will loop back around and tell you what it is. But it was that idea of not just saying you're kind of upset. It's like really putting intent into what the person, hearing what they're saying and saying it back.
I think it's so powerful because obviously mindful listening is is how we help other people flourish. You know, sometimes as an executive coach, I wonder if I have to say anything at all, or if I could just mindfully listen and then with, you know, unconditional positive regard, beam back at them with the occasional sort of extremely generous restating or looping back. And that's really all the other person needs in order to discover their own wisdom and their own efficacy. Yeah. So
It's almost magical.
It is magical. It is definitely magical. So I'm glad that you talked about that looping. Something that was new to me that I'd love for us to spend just a few minutes on is complexify the binary.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That word complexify is just delicious, isn't it? To complexify. I mean, one of our core values is simplicity.
Right.
So it's sort of the opposite of complexify, but I love the complexification of the binary. So yeah, we are in the midst of 2025, and it is binary all day long. It is Republicans and Democrats. It's the good guys and the bad guys. It's the liberals and the conservatives, and none of that is true, is it?
There are people who use the binary really, really effectively to get people to group. And there's a lot of power in that. There's a reason. The human brain, I think, even kind of naturally, we want to do that, right? We want to be like safe, not safe, good, bad, threat, not threat, us, them, right? And Ripley's book talks a lot about that because she really goes through several examples of violent conflict, right? Conflict that has like cost lives, conflict that has shaped countries, and the power and the dangerous power, I think she would say, of the binary. So I agree. When I read complexify, I was like, we don't want it to be more messy. Everything is messy. Why would we want? But that's not what she's talking about. Yeah. So the idea of complexifying is if people can sort into two groups, that's a natural fault line. Like it is way too easy to be like, well, I'm one or the other. And then to make assumptions about those groups, right? They like blue, they like green. They like dogs, they like cats. And then what it means to be part of that group. They hate blue skies. They hate the daytime, whatever. So complexify, when she talks about it, when I thought about our workplaces, is making there be more choices, right? So not just, I think some of the examples I used were like a leadership team and staff, but are there places that people can have more places where they can find their identity? Is there gardening? Like, do people cross over in gardening? Is there people who like to walk their dogs or take walks over lunch? Anything that makes there be more identity than us and them, because what that does is it creates these little bridges, right, in between people who might be on opposite sides of an idea of a conflict. I think the other thing the complexify brings is it does have to have that element that we talked about with looping of kind of curiosity of like, what else is there, right? So maybe somebody's Republican, like what else is there to them? Is that the whole of their identity? Maybe somebody's Democrat, like what else do they do besides be a Democrat? And what often happens from Ripley's book in High Conflict is that's the only thing we see. We only see this one identity, and then things break down.
Yeah. I'm thinking a lot about the spirit of wanting and how do we find where we're actually the same. And rather than us versus them. So, this idea that two things can be true at the same time. There is no one truth. We all have our own perspectives. All of that, I think, is what I thought about when I thought about the complexification of the binary. So that is a really important part that I would like to experiment a little bit with myself in my work. I've been hearing a lot about goodwill and how do we build relational capital on our teams. We used to talk about sort of putting deposits into the trust bank and taking withdrawals from the, and making sure that there's still enough in there if we have to take a withdrawal.
Right.
So could you talk a little bit about expanding the us and sort of goodwill in the workplace as it relates to having healthy conflict?
Absolutely. Real quick on the goodwill and the deposits.
Yeah.
It just made me think of the Gottmans.
Oh,
With they calculated like the ratio of 5 positive interactions to 1 not so positive interaction, and how that's a way of building. And they talk more about interpersonal marriage, friendships, things like that, partnerships. But just even having a ratio idea, I was like, that's fascinating.
Well,
right?
And so it's very similar in positive organizational behavior and coaching. You think about the PEA and the NEA, the positive emotional attractor state versus the negative emotional attractor state. And you want a ratio of 6 to 1.
Interesting.
So this is Richard Boyatzis from Case Western.
Okay.
Yeah. So the Gottman and the Boyatzis, they're very similar. But it is so many more deposits that we need to make because of that negativity bias.
Yeah.
Just usurps all the positives just to get to, the balance.
Right. And really that's what, like with expanding the us, part of what, when we were talking about an article around disagreement or conflict, part of why I went to Ripley's book is because we're steeped in this culture and this reality right now of everywhere we look, we can find people moving away from each other, right? Not talking about whatever the real issue is, separating into camps, going protective. And it's kind of wild to me that we think that we would show up at work and somehow just engage in conflict healthily, right? And know what to do when it's not necessarily something we're seeing modeled. It's not something we're taught. So this idea of expanding the us, and some of the examples Ripley used are those sometimes annoying, like, please show up and sing happy birthday to this person, right, in the office, or let's go on a bowling excursion together. So expanding the us is a bit related to complexify the binary of what group are you in, where do you find your identity, and it's the how can teams make people not feel othered, right? How can they make it so that people know that they belong there, that they're glad that they're there, and have kind of specific experiences that prove that true. So, recognizing people's birthdays is an easy one. But what else? Like, I'm sure there's more creativity on the teams of, like, how do you model that you are part of my group?
Well, and I think sometimes in the workplace we think of things that aren't worky, right? Like birthdays and bowling. But I think about podcasts and writing articles, and I think about Review Club, and all of those things build goodwill. So they call it affiliative leadership. So for me to say, hey, Hunter and Ashlyn, could you two work together on an article for Work Wisdom Press? You two grew in usness through that process. I watched you do it. And so so I think about it in terms of maybe even use stress or challenge stress at work. To expand the goodwill, because achievement is such an important part of flourishing. Right. So it can be worky.
I love that.
It can have actual tangible. Right. There could be a podcast that comes out of this.
And here we are.
Yeah, I know. And so so much of what I think about as a leader is, well, yes, I want a product to come out of this. I want a podcast so people can listen to this and grow. But really, I want to have a little time with Ashlyn to connect with her. Yeah. So I think, we can think about what kinds of challenge stress can we insert into our teams. I don't know. What do you think about that with your teams?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't say on the air. I don't know.
No, I love the idea of taking intentionality. Well, and can you define challenge stress real quick? Because I think I know what it means. But
So Paul Zak is a neuro leadership guru, and actually he has an article about trust and neuro leadership, and it was Harvard Business Review. I'm guessing maybe 2015 or 2017. But one of the things that he says builds trust in a culture is when the leader gives challenge stress. So it's some sort of project that's really going to stretch the team where they feel a little over their skis, but they're bonding together. So you'll see me do it.
Yeah, now I'm looking for it.
Oh no, what's she gonna ask us to do next? But so that's challenge stress.
Right.
So the difference between so there's distress and then eustress, eustress. Okay. So eustress is good stress, challenge stress. So we use the word stress all the time, but it's just an abbreviation for these shortened versions of these two other words like distress and eustress. And eustress is where we have flourishing.
Interesting.
So, we have to achieve in order to flourish in life. And so many people have forgotten that. They want no stress.
Right.
And it's like, well, actually, that's not the way to vitality. So I'm sort of sometimes feeling like the voice in the wilderness, like, no, let's have some hard things ahead of us.
Right. And it's worth it. Like, it's worth the journey through it. Right. Yeah. I love that idea of like how leaders can, I'm just imagining with the idea of like breaking down the binary, expanding the us, like looking intentionally for opportunities for challenge stress, maybe between teams, maybe between colleagues like you did for Hunter and I, because our work doesn't necessarily overlap all the time. Right? Like, I love that as a framing.
So I think there's lots of places we can expand the us within our teams with creativity, and maybe we have a product that comes out the other side, or maybe the journey is really the goal, if really we're focused on the goodwill. So beautiful article. I really hope that everyone reads it, because, it's reframing the word conflict into something that's really something we want to move towards. And we want to set up some structures around it so that it's safe, and we ideally want to do that before it gets to the place where we're moving away from each other, which inevitably would happen. If you were to give one piece of advice to our listeners about what they could do to move towards good stress on their team, some of our listeners are the CEO, and some of them are in charge, and they have lots of outsized power, and some of them are not. Right. So, I don't know if you can speak to something that would maybe it's for a leader, but maybe it's not for someone who's in sort of in that kind of role yet.
Yeah. I would say something I found true in my career journey, something she talks over and over again about in the book, is people can't get into good conflict until they feel understood. And something I love about that is that whether you're the CEO or whether you are new at your workplace or if you're somewhere in the middle, you can control your curiosity and you can control your listening. And so what I would say is, if there's already a place you're seeing conflict or something is annoying you, get curious. Like, get curious. What's going on with that person? Why aren't they following through on some piece that they said they would? Why do they end meetings early? Why, when somebody starts to talk about something that you're excited about, they kind of cut off the conversation? And look for opportunities to talk to them, like to ask them, like, hey, how are you doing on this project? I noticed that we were planning to turn in this part at this time, and we didn't. How are you feeling? What's going on? That might not be your role, but I bet you could find a way to be curious and then to listen really well. Because when people see you listening and see you understanding, that can really open up a lot towards what you called the good stress, the opportunity, the how do we move forward together.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Ashlyn, for being with me today, and thank you for writing this beautiful article. I'd like to end with a quote from Rumi. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there.